Are you completely confident about how much it really costs you for employees? And are you really sure that when you're bidding projects that your cost related to having those employees includes all of the related burden in your numbers? And are you making sure that you're charging that to the job? Hi, I'm Vicki Suter with Suter Business Builders, and for over 25 years, I've been helping contractors have a better understanding of what their numbers really are so that they can start to make more money on the bottom line. Because if you're like my client, Mike, you may be one of those people who thinks that you know what the number is, but you don't actually know. And in this video, I'm going to share with you how to know with clarity and certainty and confidence what your real labor cost is, and how to make sure that when you look at your profit and loss statement, you're actually looking at the right number. My client, Mike, when we first started working together, I asked him this question because he was really frustrated that his bottom line wasn't meeting with his goals. He had wanted to make more money. And I started to ask him a bunch of questions and look at his financial statements. And I said, well, labor is your largest line item, right? That's the thing that's costing you the most money. Do you know what your total cost related to having that employee is? And are you making sure that you're including that when you bid your numbers? And as we started to dig, Mike was kind of shocked to discover that, well, in fact, he didn't know, but he thought that he did. And he was really surprised to also discover that he had been looking at his profit and loss statement every month, thinking that his numbers were just fine, when in fact, he was not making that much in gross profit margin that he thought he was on his jobs. And so the first thing that we did is we started to dig into, all right, well, what does it really cost you to have that employee? Like a lot of times we think, well, it's gross wages, it's payroll taxes, maybe workers' comp, but there's always often more costs than that related to that employee. And how do you make sure that that's included in the cost that you pass on to the client, right? Because it costs you for things like, yes, gross wages and payroll taxes, all your related employer payroll taxes. It also costs you for workers' comp. But then there's other things, especially in these days when we're really having to give more benefits and more putting more into what it costs us for an employee. How do we make sure that those costs are included in there? And I'm talking about things like 401k or health insurance benefits, or if your policy for health insurance includes things like life insurance or disability insurance. And also there's other costs related to having an employee, right? There's things like small tools or cell phones or gas. Like I work with a lot of clients in the Bay Area, and a lot of those people are paying their employees to have to commute because it's quite a long ways often. So all of those things are related costs to having that employee. And when you're not charging that to the project, when you're bidding, what ends up happening is that becomes part of your overhead cost. And one of the things that Mike had shared with me was he said, my overhead costs keep going up and my bottom line isn't. And so part of the second part of the problem was not only was Mike not charging the job for all those increased related costs and being super clear about what is that number, but the second problem was that when he was looking at his profit and loss statement, it didn't actually include all of those costs. So what can you do? Well, let me show you what we did and where we started with Mike. There were two key areas where we focused. The first thing that we looked at was, what does it really cost you for an employee? Let's get clear about that. And then let's get clear about how you're allocating those costs on your profit and loss statement so that you can get a better picture of what's actually going on and what your real gross profit margin is. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So this is the labor cost calculator that we started working with Mike. And what we did is we plugged in, okay, what does it cost you per hour for a project manager? It's $65 an hour. And I said, okay, so there's 2,080 hours in a year. If you have somebody who's full-time, what are the related costs for having that employee? So the first thing that we tackled was this first section, which is employer taxes and workers' comp. You have to pay FICA and Medicare. That's always the same for everybody. And then usually you have state unemployment insurance and federal unemployment insurance. That's a flat amount per year per employee. And then you have workers' comp. So we put all those figures in there, and workers' comp, we calculated for him based on per employee what that rate was. And then we have this other column here. So this other column that we calculated was, I said to Mike, so tell me all the other things that you pay for employees for, right? So he said, we pay for parking, we pay for small tools, we have other things that we pay for people like uniforms, and we pay for people's cell phones. I'm like, okay, great. So we kind of did some rough math and figured out it costs about $1 an hour per employee for those other costs. So we included that in there. And then I said, so tell me about monthly, what are your monthly expenditures? Other things that you pay for an employee. And he said, well, I have health insurance. That's a flat amount per employee, differing by employee. And then we also have dental insurance and we have life insurance. So we included that in there. And then I said, you have 401k, and he did. So we put a percentage in there, and that calculated that. And then 401k, there's a fee for that gets charged every month per employee. So that's $10. And I said, so how many weeks vacation do you offer? And he said, yep, pretty standard. We offer 2 weeks vacation for every employee. Now, the way this template is set up is it automatically just came in here and it calculated, well, what's the monthly cost for all those benefits? And then it calculated what's that cost per hour for that employee. So it's $6.73 an hour. So when you look at it, this person who is costing $65 an hour in terms of gross wages, you're paying them $65 an hour. The actual cost for that person is $86 an hour. Mike was shocked to look at this number when he looked at it all together, because the only thing he ever included were sort of these basic costs, right? He knew to include payroll taxes and workers' comp, but he wasn't including any of these other costs. And so when he started doing that, then he could start to see, oh my gosh, that person's costing me a lot more. When I budget for my projects go forward, I need to make sure that I'm calculating it based on that cost. So that was the first thing that we did, because that was a key way that Mike was going to start to affect his bottom line, because he was able to actually start to include all of the cost related to having that employee as part of his base cost when he was bidding. The second thing that we did was to look at his profit and loss statement. And when we looked at his profit and loss statement here under cost of goods sold, a number of the costs related to that employee were not showing in here. Like, it showed direct labor and it showed payroll taxes, but there was this other tax related to having employees for San Francisco city tax. That wasn't included in there. Workers' comp was not showing up there. Benefits was not showing up there, and neither was 401k. So now, and neither was this labor, small tools, direct fuel, other per diem costs. None of that was showing up in there. And without all those costs, Mike was showing a 38, almost 39% gross profit margin. He thought he was doing great. But let me put those numbers back in here. And when I put them in, he went from a 38% gross profit margin to a 32% gross profit margin. Now, all of a sudden, Mike could see, oh my gosh, this is the reason I thought I was doing so much better. But all of those costs, especially as he started to add benefits, were all listed down here under his overhead cost instead of up under cost of goods sold. So one of the things that Mike started to do was to start to have his bookkeeper reallocate all of those related costs up to cost of goods sold, so he could see how much he was really making on his projects. So if you're wondering why your bottom line is not meeting the goals that you set, or if you're noticing that your overhead costs keep creeping up, what I highly encourage you to do is go check out the template that I'm including in here, that labor cost calculator template. I'm including it here. Go check it out and calculate it for yourself and find out if you're actually including in your bids the total real cost of doing projects for that, per employee. And then the second thing is I highly encourage you to make sure that included in your cost of goods sold on your profit and loss statement is those real costs for your field employees so that you can actually see what's your real gross profit margin. I really hope that you found today's video helpful, and I highly encourage you go download that template and start getting a better feel for your numbers, because it'll really start to help you have greater clarity and more confidence to be able to impact your bottom line. All right, thanks for being here today. And if you know of anyone else who could benefit from this video, please share it, and feel free to leave a comment below. And I look forward to seeing you next time in the Profit Builder.